Various legislation or city ordinances can really impact the profitability of a landlord, our ability to provide good quality housing. So we want to be aware of what they're thinking and making sure that they know the consequences of something that they might do. We can be both an information source and we can try to influence it one way or another.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. Hello and welcome to episode 116. When it comes to politics, everyone has their reasons for voting for a certain candidate or backing certain issues. And as real estate investors, we need to be aware of which candidates are best suited to support our ability to provide housing for our residents while still making a profit. Today, we're going to be talking about the places where politics and real estate connect and how we as real estate investors can support the candidates and legislation that in turn support us as investors. And here to have that conversation with me is Tom Koetsier, award-winning broker with Compass Realty Services. Tom also sits on the Grand Rapids Planning Commission. He's the president of the RPOA, and he's a successful real estate investor as well. Tom, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Brian. Glad to be here.
Now, you also sit on various government affair type committees in the PAC committee. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. The RPOA is very involved from a political action standpoint and with government affairs, both on the local level and on the state level. First of all, our organization has a government affairs committee that has about 8 members on it, and we get together monthly and discuss upcoming legislation to take a position on it. We may talk about various problems that maybe other landlords have brought up with interactions with the city. We may know about new programs coming with the city, and the city is asking us to comment on it or participate on it. We're quite involved with the city of Grand Rapids as they approach new programs. We do have, we're often asked for a voice. And quite often asked for information about how some new program or situation might impact landlords. So we have a good relationship with all the various municipalities in and around Grand Rapids or Kent County.
And why is it important that the RPOA be politically active?
Various legislation or city ordinances can really impact the profitability of a landlord, our ability to provide good quality housing. So we want to be aware of what they're thinking and making sure that they know the consequences of something that they might do, whether that makes us harder to provide affordable, good quality housing, or whether that maybe it's something that's positive that would make it easier for us to participate and offer better quality housing to tenants. So we can be both an information source and we can try to influence it one way or another based on the specific situation.
Okay. Well, let's talk some specifics then. Where has the RPOA worked with the city of Grand Rapids to craft legislation or affect policy?
We were very involved in 2012 when the single-family inspections came to be. I know that the single-family inspections went through, despite our opposition to them on the whole, but we sat in various committee meetings where different parts of the city and different stakeholders were involved. We were able to impact that ordinance from the standpoint of, one, being able to get a 6-year cert on a house after various amounts of time would pass. We were also able to kill, the first part of that was they wanted a fee for registration for all rental property, and we were able to kill that part of it. And just through the negotiation and our voice being heard, we made that at least a little bit more palatable.
And if you were to put a dollar figure on that, how much were you saving, or how much are investors and rental property owners in Grand Rapids saving because of the input you had into this?
Well, a 6-year cert versus a 4-year cert is 2 more years that they're not in your property. So your fee of, I think it's a little over $200 now for a single-family inspection stretches out for 2 more years if you get the 6-year cert. And then the idea that the more often, they're in their building, the more you're building, the more costly, it's going to be for you, although most landlords keep their properties up on a regular basis.
And what was the city considering charging for a registration fee to register your property as a rental?
As I recall, $100, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure that was exactly what they were going to negotiate that fee. Mm-hmm. And most of it revolved around the idea of adding staff to be able to inspect all of the single-family houses that would then come online. And as a matter of fact, they did it over about a 6-year period as far as, getting them all inspected. So it was a pretty big undertaking for them.
And let's stay on the municipal level. What are you working on right now, or what is the city working on that the RPOA and the Government Affairs Committee is involved in? Well,
there is one program or suggestion that came out of the Affordable Housing Now group that talked about application fees and reducing the amount of application fees charged for tenants looking for apartments. And RPOA has already met with city officials, city lawyers. We had a meeting where we talked about what that would look like, who would administer that, looking at possibly of the idea of a credit report that was taken being good for, and none of this is coming to be just yet, but that credit report being good for 30 days, that landlords could share that credit report so that there wouldn't be extra fees to tenants. So we're involved in what that ordinance will look like, but at present that's lying dormant.
It's not just the city of Grand Rapids, but you work with the neighboring communities as well. Can you talk about some of the successes that the RPOA has had working with those municipalities?
Absolutely. The biggest one that comes to mind is a negotiation that went on with the city of Wyoming. Mark Troy and Kathy Dennison were very involved in that negotiation, along with Clay Powell, our director. And we were able to move the city inspection, the ability to get a 4-year cert as opposed to just a 2-year. In the beginning and for a long time, Wyoming would only issue a 2-year cert, so you were back in front of them every 2 years, paying another fee and bringing the house up to whatever violations that they'd found. And given that idea of going to a 4-year, if you were in good standing and kind of doubled up what landlords were saving based on that negotiation, and that's worked well. So that probably saves an investor at least a couple hundred dollars. Every 2 years.
Every 2 years. Huh?
Yep.
So that adds up. A couple hundred here,
absolutely.
A couple hundred there.
Yep.
That's big savings.
We've also went to Bert Hybor, the chairman of our Government Affairs Committee, and I had a meeting with Holland officials who were looking to add more restrictive rental requirements, especially in and around Hope College. And we met with them and brought them up to speed on how that would affect landlords and how that would affect their profit picture and their ability to rent, and rents would go up. So we had an impact in that one too. They did still enact some restrictive legislation, but Holland's kind of done that in the past. So.
Well, it seems like it's important that the RPOA is there to kind of educate legislators.
Excellent.
And
exactly.
the public as well, because there's a lot of ideas floating around out there about how to make housing more affordable. But a lot of it, if enacted, could be counterproductive. Can you talk about some of those ideas that are out there?
Well, and a lot of those, as much as anything, come to bear. There seems to be constant pressure from the municipalities on making rental properties more restrictive as far as being inspected for lead, lead-based paint and lead pipes and those kinds of things. So we're constantly on the lookout for that, but a lot of those come from the state level. We've tried to kill bills that have to do with lead inspections, and even the state trying to decide how often rental inspections can be done. There was a bill recently that came out to restrict your ability to evict drug offenders. We now have a nice policy for moving along drug offenders. This was going to call for a conviction rather than just a police report.
So if you had someone selling drugs in your property, you would have to wait for them to be convicted before you could evict them.
So that might take an extra 60 days that they'd still be in your property until they were convicted. And then there's always the idea that creeps out of the state legislature all the time, and sometimes municipalities talk about the desire for rent controls. We all know rent controls don't work, and no reason to get into those details, but rent controls would really be a bad thing for landlords. And then there's all the ideas around, and the cities get very involved in this, being very restrictive about registering and reporting, blighted properties and vacant properties, and so we need to be ever vigilant that those laws aren't so restrictive that landlords can't operate to rehab their property or recover from tenant damage or those kinds of things.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. And at the state level, I know that the RPOA Government Affairs Committee travels to Lansing. What is it, once every month or every couple months?
We meet in Lansing, and now you're talking about the Rental Property Association of Michigan, of which Grand Rapids is a member. There are about 13 different rental property owner associations around the state that belong to RPOAM, and each association contributes to the tune of $1 per member per month. So some of your dues go to supporting this legislative function and the hiring of a lobbyist who is really the contact with the legislators, getting our points across, looking for people that will introduce our legislation, providing education on bills that are being written, as far as how that'll impact landlords, whether landlords would agree with it or not agree with it, support it or not support it. So it is capped for larger organizations like ourselves at $500 a month. But an organization like Kalamazoo that has about 110 members would contribute $110 a month. Now that money goes to RPOAM. We do, financial statements on that, and it's all above board, but it's mainly to pay the lobbyist, Karub and Associates in Lansing, to represent our interests, to get our name known, to get the ideas of landlords out in front of legislators. We also use some of that money to do at least one legislative reception a year where we'll serve tacos and beer and invite legislators in from 5 to 7 on an evening. We've been doing it in October. And that really allows us to get in front of legislators. We try to match the legislators that are coming up with the different organizations that are going to be there so they have a chance to really talk with their representatives. I think the last one we did last October, we had 45 or 50 legislators in the room and probably at least that many members of RPOAM coming in from Flint and Detroit and Kalamazoo and Muskegon and Grand Rapids, of course. Big Rapids, even Traverse City was represented.
So it's a great opportunity for our representatives and the RPOA members to connect and
sure,
share
you
ideas.
get to sit down with a legislator, and they're very open to wanting information about how does this impact, or they see this bill is coming out of committee, and how does the RPOA really feel about this bill or that bill. And it allows you to, make a few quick bullet points with people that are representing you and that are going to make the decision to, impact the legislation that comes out, and whether it's favorable to landlords or what it is we're trying to do.
And speaking of impacting legislation, you mentioned a lobbying firm that the RPOA works
Correct.
with. How important has that lobbying firm been to furthering the interests of rental property investors and landlords?
Well, Koetsier Associates, and we built up, over time, really has good relationships. They're one of the biggest lobbying firms in Lansing, and we built up a good relationship with not only all the legislators, but it's also important to work on the leadership of who's deciding what bills come to the floor, committee chairs, what bills are going to be heard to be passed on to the floor. So a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and most legislators now know that they have somebody to call to get the information they might need about whether landlords support or not. Koetsier is, in the State House every day, talking to this one or that one. We're also, we try to key in on people that have good reputations in Lansing that can introduce bills that we're trying to get passed, that we're out in front of. Maybe we've even had something to do with writing them. Also, a lot of meetings go on. Clay Powell, our director, I would say at least once a month, if not twice a month, he's in Lansing talking to, a legislator, or sitting in a hearing about a bill or changing the language. And those meetings sometimes fight over one word for all afternoon. So it does take some effort to hang in there and try to get it right for landlords.
What are some of the bills that the RPOA is actively either fighting or trying to get passed?
Well, we've still got our LLC bill out there, where we're trying to make it so landlords don't have to hire an attorney to go to court to do an eviction. Right now, our present bill would help landlords that are single member LLCs or husband and wife LLCs to not have to be represented by a lawyer in court. And that one's stalled right now, but at least it's getting a hearing. We're looking for, we've got a bill out there to allow landlord to get restitution for lost income from rental property made uninhabitable by tenants who cause damage. We're very interested in bills that are out there that restrict regulation of vacation rentals and short-term rentals. In other words, we'd like to see the legislature recognize property rights so that you can rent how you want to with your properties, and there are a couple of those bills out there, one of which we support.
Yeah, so that would go against some of the local municipalities that might be anti-Airbnb or vacation rental properties.
Correct.
The RPOA is taking the stance that it's property rights, and if the
Exactly.
rental property owner wants to do vacation rental,
Correct.
That they should have that opportunity.
One other one would be a bill to increase the amount allowed for attorney fees and that we can charge back to tenants, increasing that number. And we've had some successes in the past. We were successful, worked hard for a long time in increasing the time that a garnishment is good for. Again, a lot of times, an only way to recover your money from a tenant after an eviction is to garnish wages, and we've been able to up that amount that people can go for in small claims court, and then be able to collect through garnishments.
What other big successes have we had?
It would be the tenant rights bill just recently passed. That controls or gives the tenant the right to refuse an inspection Now, the city always has, city or municipality in doing the inspection, always has the right to, go to court and get a writ and still get in and inspect the unit. But the tenant has rights too, and if they don't want the city to be in their building, they can refuse that. It also.
So does that apply if the city is doing their regular rental certification process and they want to get into a tenant's unit? The tenant has the right to say, no, you can't come into my unit.
The tenant has the right to say no. Yep. And they always have, based on the Fourth Amendment, if you will. But at the present time, this kind of makes it more in front of the municipality, that the tenant has the right to refuse. And it's the kind of law that probably is going to take a court case or two, to establish precedent. But at least we've stated it out there. Another part of that bill was that if a municipality was charging a certification fee or a rental fee, they had to do the inspection. Believe it or not, there are cities in Michigan that charge a fee every month every year, but yet don't do an inspection. So
they get the money but don't do the work for it.
Exactly.
I remember before that law was passed, the tenants' rights bill, at one of our properties, we had a tenant who did not want to let the city in to inspect the unit. And the inspector told us, well, you'll just have to evict them.
That's not always the prudent thing for a landlord to do either.
No, so I'm glad that we were able to get that bill passed. So can you tell us a little bit then about the PAC, what it is and your involvement in it, and why it's important to rental property owners?
Well, the first thing to know is that we're very involved in evaluating candidates that are running for office. We do interview candidates prior to the election. We'll probably be doing this in June for the November election. We ask them various questions about how they feel about property rights, how they feel about rental property. It may be something specific. We've asked a question about land banks many times of legislators during those interviews. We spend about 20 minutes and get to know that legislator a little bit, or potential legislator. He can also ask questions about what the RPOA does, how many members we have, those kinds of things. So it becomes a way of introducing ourselves to them also. Then from that afterwards, we'll decide whether to support or not support. And that gets into an evaluation of how important the race is, whether they're friend or whether we see them as not being, a friend, or and then we will support or not support, accordingly. And then that support usually goes towards their buying of signs or radio time or whatever it is they're doing to get elected. And we would contribute a significant amount of money, but we wouldn't be their main backing or endorsement or anything like that. But somebody that we really believed in and thought was going to do a job, or maybe the incumbent who'd already been doing a good job for us, going into an election period, we might give them like $500. And I don't think that necessarily buys us anything more than a good hearing. When we call, they're going to be willing to listen. It doesn't really buy you any influence or whatever, but it does buy you the fact that they're known, they know what your ideas are, and how you feel about things. Gives us the ability to get somebody on the phone and either support or not support a certain issue that might be in front of them, down the road.
Yeah, so the RPOA Political Action Committee, or the PAC, is raising money to be able to donate to candidates who are running both for local office or state office.
And no dues go towards PAC involvement. PAC are all the funds are raised on the outside for political action, to further landlords' ability to be profitable and not have too much regulation and restrictive legislation. So the PAC then is used to support might be races in and around Grand Rapids. From a legislative standpoint at the state level, it might go to some leadership or chairman of committees that all the RPOA legislation or rental property legislation would go through. So we might invest in somebody's campaign in the thumb area or whatever if they were a chairman of a committee or leadership as far as Senate Pro Tem or something to that effect. So, and we take the advice of everyone around the table, usually about 5 or 6 of us sitting on those interviews. So then it's a discussion afterwards and pros and cons and trying to choose the best candidates to back as possible to get the best bang for our buck with those PAC dollars.
And in the upcoming 2018 election coming up in November, what is the statistic? It's like 60% of the seats are up for grabs?
60%, about 2/3.
And this is at the state level?
At the state level, 2/3 of the legislative seats are up for grabs. So this is going to be a whole new group of people that we have to get our word out to and have some impact with and let them know who we are. The interview process will be the start of that. PAC funds are part of that. And then the ongoing lobbying continues to keep our name in front of them and just gets us a hearing with these newer people. And you'd be surprised how many legislators come in, and they've come in to interview because of course they need money to help their campaign, and that they'd never heard of the RPOA or I've heard the question, what is it you people do? And, to be able to explain that to someone, is really a good thing in a face-to-face meeting. Further, we would use PAC funds throughout the year. They do fundraisers. Different legislators do fundraisers. They might have a golf outing or a hot dog cook-off or something along that line, and we may contribute 200 or 300, and then maybe a couple of our members of the Government Affairs Committee would go to that event, and during that you'd have a couple minutes where you might be able to talk to the candidate a little bit or the legislator a little bit, and all those things are beneficial, keeping our name out there, showing our interest, and showing our support for people that see things the same way that we do.
So the purpose of the PAC is to basically disperse funds to different candidates who are running for office.
Correct.
This doesn't necessarily buy their vote, as a lot of people think PACs do, but it buys you a certain amount of recognition with those candidates.
Correct.
So when a bill comes up or an issue comes up, you can at least get them on the phone and they will hear you out as far as what the RPOA's
and it might
stance is.
It might not be us. It might be a direct call that Clay makes. He does some of that, but it's going to mainly be that lobbyist that's going to be walking the halls, on a regular basis or having a meeting with it. It might not be with the legislator themselves. It might be with their staff, so that when they have their staff meeting and they go over bills or whatever, that the information would come out that the landlords support this, or are withholding support unless it changes to this. So, all that information runs usually through the lobbyists.
And it helps give you a voice in the legislature.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to help when they're shaping policy that will affect rental property owners.
Yep, I think it opens doors.
So I think the important thing then is for rental property owners and landlords to understand just how important it is to have that voice.
Yeah, you can. A lot of times, if you just think about it this way, there's bills that get introduced that come out of Detroit that would be regulation that maybe they might need in Detroit, but it would be very detrimental to Grand Rapids in that it would be a lot more restrictive. So we're constantly on the lookouts for problems in other areas of the state don't bleed over and cause undue regulation for, Grand Rapids, Kent County area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for those listening who would like to get more involved, contribute to the PAC, how would they do so?
There is, you can do that right online, and that's RPOAonline.org. There's a button there under Government Affairs that you can just make a donation right online using a credit card. You've got to fill out your name and address, and all this is campaign funds like this are all controlled, so you need to be, upfront about who you are. If you are sending a check in, it can't be a corporate check. It can be cash. But that money then would be sent to the RPOA and would go right into a separate PAC account that we would draw on as we needed the funds. And I would encourage anyone who believes strongly in some of these ideas that they want to see passed or they want to see defeated, that it would really help their cause if they would decide to donate. And any amount is fine, whatever you can. If you can do $20, if you can do $100, that's up to you. And you can do it as often as you want during the year, or you can do it once a year. We just did a pretty in-depth fundraising through the convention season, where we were able to, we did collect about $6,000, which was, real successful for a campaign for ours. But it needs to be ongoing. Just remember, none of the membership money goes towards, the PAC fund. It's the PAC fund does, as far as the influence that it helps with, all comes from these political action donations.
Yeah, if you're already a member of the RPOA, some of your dues are going toward the lobbying group.
The lobbying part of it, yeah.
But as far as the actual political action committee and the PAC funds, that's a completely separate thing.
Separate fundraising event.
So even if you are already a member of the RPOA, it's still important to consider investing in the PAC fund.
Correct.
Because that is going to help prevent laws from being passed that will end up costing you money.
Absolutely.
as an owner. Well, anything else we can
I would just say that anybody that has an interest in government affairs or these kinds of, anyone can join our government affairs committee. You can feel free to call me or Clay Powell, the director of the RPOA, if you've got something that's particularly bothering you, or you've got some difficulty with any one of the numerous cities or municipalities in the area, and we'll do what we can to help you.
And I would agree with that, and I would also add that just getting involved in the RPOA is important too. There are other committees that can use people's help. The Government Affairs Committee is what we're talking about today in the PAC, and it's so important. But just if you own rental property, being a member of the RPOA is great. But if you can consider being more active and possibly getting on some committees, one
Exactly.
or two committees.
It's a good way that some camaraderie exists in that, and you get to meet some people that are doing the same thing you are, and some good ideas come out of it. And plus, it's always good to give back to the organization.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, thanks for being here today to talk about the PAC and help raise funds for the PAC. Definitely it's important. I know I've donated money to the PAC as well, and I'd encourage our listeners to do so. And thank you for being here.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity, Brian. I appreciate it.
This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.